Well, all right, again. I'm going to go ahead and work my way. In the beginning of this, well, I guess towards the bottom of this feed here, one of the first videos was an orientation video, and early on here, I cut into covering the 7 Hermetic Principles as they are, but then I discussed alternative orders for the principles, and the fact that the order that they were given in the public Kabbalion was more than likely scrambled for sake of not divulging more than what would have been viewed as allowable in the year 1908 when the book was written. I feel like the order of the principles was obscured, and I cover that in that first video on all 7 principles. And then I talk about how there's a better flow than the order that's given, and then I illustrate what that is. It's intuitive. There's an intuitive flow that can be noted and reconciled against modern, analytic idealist modeling and the conscious realism modeling and the mathematical objective sciences. They can all be reconciled. So I went through that in a video. But since then, I took off talking about a lot of points that run off of the first Hermetic principle: the all is mind, the universe is mental. There's just a ton of implications that follow, and I've spent a lot of time on that. And then I decided, well, I'm going to go ahead and move the focus into the second Hermetic principle. That was been made already. It's up on the feed. When you see the interlocked triangle symbol, Star David, Seal Solomon, all this kind of, and countless cultures. It's Vedic culture. It's everywhere, all over the world. The reason for its widespread popularity in mythology is the illustration that it conveys, which is several different things. The 2 mental hemispheres locked in conjunction, opposites locked together. In other words, this and that combined into unitary wholeness. That as above, so below is the axiom. But it means a lot of things, and I went into some of the things that don't get touched on so much. Implications that minds often never get to, but are intuitive and don't break with divulging the mysteries too much, so it's pretty well acceptable to talk about in this day and age. I'm going to do the same now to the third Hermetic principle, and I'm going to go through all 7 like this. So the meaning of this illustration here is to walk it down to the focus now. This is a non-dual suggestion. The all is mind, the universe is mental. There's not 2 or 3 all minds. This is the idea, in a scientific sense, that would be non-local mind, non-local reality. 3 Nobel Prizes went out for work in quantum entanglement, which furthers the notion that physical looking objects in space, physical looking, isolated, boundaried objects in space are not locally real as they appear. The reality is non-local, which is an omnipresence. The idea of an omnipresent God is symbolic, it's metaphorical and allegorical, and what the symbolic allegories direct the mind to is the mystery of the preconditions of its own existence, which is what would be called God. Street name, God. Again, in philosophy, that would be mind at large, or core subjectivity, the core of all subsequent subjective experiences that follow from the first principle. This would be the thing in itself, the mystery behind what can be known, according to Kant. This is the thing that further than Kant to Schopenhauer with his will. It can be known by direct acquaintance. You can't know it intellectually, but you can know it through direct experience. Experientially, you can know it. You can experience the mystery, which is the mystery ground of your own being. This is why it's an inward thing. This is all first principle stuff. As above, so below. That brings in the second principle. The mirror effect. The one gets fragmented into the appearance of many with the correspondence principle. And it sets up a vibrational, what's illustrated as a vibrational continuum with matter visualized as low vibration. And on the other side, this is linear, so of course this is another metaphor, another allegory pointing to the mystery of being and non-being. This would be spirit, capital S, spirit. So, which would be high vibration. And so this enters as above, so below, this vibrational continuum. There's vibration within a non-local mind by default of pure awareness. Vibration, and this is mental. This is a mentation reality with mental vibration. Mental vibration is what follows correspondence according to this. There is a better way even. So I'm not going to confuse things. I'm going to stick with the traditional way right now. To see that other way, you go back and see it in the feed. All 7 principles covered in one shot. It's an hour long. And you can see the alternative way there. Just be too confusing to jump ways. All right, so what I've got illustrated right here is to illustrate, let's just say subatomic particles, quantum streams, anything. They are vibratory. And these little... This red is to illustrate core subjectivity in the all mind, as above, so below. And now we're introducing that core subjectivity, taking on, wave-based communications. The vibration is causing dissociated perceptions of individuated particles. This is where local reality happens, according to a modern scientific view. This is where the non-local mind, through correspondence, breaks into what we would consider local realism or local reality. Well, we know that local realism is fundamentally false by way of that work that has been done in quantum entanglement, particle entanglement, and the implications that justify non-local realism in such a way that Nobel Prizes have gone out. Greater than 5 sigma, whatever the requirement is. I'm drawing a blank, but there's a requirement, and they reach that benchmark and they receive Nobel Prizes. To nuance this a little bit further, or break it down a little bit further, we can imagine this as the world of subatomic particles. But there's another window of insight that deals with vibration that we need to understand right now. The toroidal field, and I have an entire video on the toroidal field structure as what I'm calling the first form. All these things that we're calling form, where we can start to... this is how objective experience comes from subjective experience. That's what we're cluing in on right now through this principle. So these wave-based communications that take place between particles could be understood as objective awareness of surrounding particles within the perception of space-time, giving us the illusory perception of individuated local objects in space. It has a lot to do with the toroidal field, because this is transparency, this is formlessness, and this is how the formless, this would be the unmoved mover. I have another video called The Irrefutable, Irreducible Ontological Primitive. Consciousness is that which everything can be reduced back into, but which itself can't be reduced any further. So it is the source of all vibration. But it itself is transparency, and the vibration is what precedes it. I'm really pushing the limits on what can be conceptualized right now. And it's okay, because as long as I'm in the conceptual realm, I have not desecrated the divine mystery. It is beyond desecration. Words cannot touch it. The fact that I have a drawing and I'm using words is evidence that I have not gone as deep as the divine mystery. For those that think maybe I'm getting a little too close, because some people may think that. Well, you've thought wrong. It's not possible to get there with language, thoughts, or concepts. It can't be degraded or devalued by intellectual mind. Put it that way. There is no such thing as going too far, actually, contrary to a lot of popular belief. It is sacred forever. It's untouchable by the intellect. As far as the intellect goes, that's what this lesson entails. This is how the intellect can orient itself to the mystery, preconditions of its own existence. And that is the sacred, that is the divine, that is the sacred. That is, street name God. Philosophical name, core subjectivity. Eastern name, Brahman. It's all the same. Bon Jovi nailed it. It's all the same. Only the names have changed. It's just a bunch of names, changing names, but it's all the same. Hidden meaning in that song. The toroidal field structure. This is going to introduce form that we're looking at here. This is like going inside of this stuff here. The toroidal field establishes a flow, and this is sort of like the creation story from Taoism. How flow, it's all about flow, and it kind of it seems to point us back to lost knowledge about the toroidal field structure and how it number one creates the Maya illusion, the illusory world of forms, Platonic forms, the whole bit. It's what gives the formless form. And it does it by way of the tripartite, the old trinities that were used in the Western Trinitarian tradition. They were taken from older cultures and furthered as part of consolidating old knowledge and passing it along for future generations. That's what was really happening the whole time behind the scenes, behind what's popular, behind what people think about it all. Knowledge preservation in the form of symbolism from what we would consider lost civilizations today. There's an equatory center, there's a magnetic neutrality, and then there's a magnetic north and a magnetic south pole on the toroidal field structure. And this toroidal field structure introduces form, and then form replicates and reproduces. I said reality in the principle of correspondence. What we covered is that reality is a series of repeating, like over and over again, repeating processes, like Russian doll, one contained within the other, layers and layers and layers of repetition. Now we're getting to the principle of vibration. There is vibration contained within all of that infinite repetition. This is what allows for the perception of local reality within non-local mind. You have to always temper it back to the context. Within what? Within non-local mind. Vibratory reality. This vibratory reality is an information system. A mind-like, pure awareness substratum, formless and transparent, creates within itself these layered worlds of experience. Layers and layers of experience with a world of experience, and we're going to, because of the repetition, worlds, plural, of experience. Many worlds. This is many worlds, not from physicalism. This is many worlds according to what would be Hermetics, and which will apply to then Analytic Idealism and Conscious Realism. Conscious Realism because of exponential growth, and Analytic Idealism because of the need in the model for layered mind at large. This is what I mean in past videos about speaking in tongues as a metaphor. Speaking in a way, in a type of scientific integrated with spiritual language that can be understood by all. The metaphor, the allegory of Pentecost, of speaking in tongues. This is it. This is a demonstration of what the allegorical symbolism of something like that points to. Speaking in a language that all minds can, not English or, not language, in the mind language of comprehension and concepts that anybody can understand. Through science, through philosophy, through spiritual mysticism, through all these things. And then the spiritual mysticism can translate to religion. I mean, this is what the speaking in tongues is really oriented to. Multidisciplinary thinking. The world's been missing out on that. It needs to come back. It was there once upon a time. It needs to return. These toroidal field structures are known to repeat themselves at all possible levels of scale. And this is why space cosmology appears to us the way that it does. People are sitting there racking their brains about how little the world is and how big this star is, and this star is bigger than that star, and that star is bigger than that star, and that galaxy's there, and look how huge things are, and we're over here in this little thing. Reality is simple. When you understand the simple reality, you get a whole different focus of cosmology. We're inside of a mental reality. There isn't any. It's not really distance. It's holistic. What looks like space isn't. It's holistic mind, and within holistic mind are appearances. The appearance of void. Void is just an appearance. It isn't nothingness. It never is. Space always turns out to be something. They can never find nothing. Whatever we point to and say nothing's there, something turns up. These are the issues that go into this. A reverberating reality, vibrational, layered. Imagine it as infinitely layered. The physical plane being one of potentially infinite layers. And this Donald Hoffman nails that with conscious realism. Exponential growth of conscious agents leads to the same general idea. And it's mathematically precise. So the maths lead to this. Mathematical objective science leads to this. Philosophy of mind through analytic idealism leads to this. And tradition from Vedic and Hermetic sources, who both come from an even further back common ancestor philosophy that informed the two. They're like two different focuses, one on the collective, one on the individual, and they need to combine so that we have a collective of well-represented individuals. This is what's going on today in the world. People don't understand this. This is what's going on underneath all the BS. This is what's coming. This is what's formulating to be the next thing in the world. That's why it's important to talk the truth right now. Whole different vision of cosmology here. We don't have to throw away physicalism. We just have to reinterpret it. We can reinterpret the existing models. So without getting into too much about how this relates to the world, it's pretty obvious that the structure itself operates this way, and the world according to how it's understood. I know there's people that are going to argue this, but let's just go with the way it's understood now and the way that most people do understand it, because the point is about consciousness, not some stupid argument that doesn't matter. So beyond stupid arguments that don't really matter, we can imagine the Earth as part of this repeating process of toroidal fields that are spherical, that are just the way everybody thinks it is, that have the poles and everything else just the way it all lines up. It's still toroidal, even if it's spherical. It doesn't have to be flat to be toroidal, and a lot of people haven't caught that yet. But here's a nickel's worth of free advice to those that haven't caught up. That is a glaring situation. So, moving forward, beyond the conspiracies and everything else. Within the world of experience, however it is, whichever way people believe it to be, it's toroidal regardless. Whichever way we take it, it's going to be toroidal. We have the objective, perceiving, subjective experiencing life forms and intelligent life. Now, this is all the way that this translates all the way to the world. The remaining of the 7 principles have to deal with the way things work within the world of experience that we're going to be getting into going forward. This is how we get to such a thing as a world of experience, through mind, correspondence, and vibration. And then follow it through to the world and to people and animals and life in the world, of the mind, of the toroidal field structure, of the correspondence, of the mirroring effects of correspondence, of the mirrored as above, so below, higher self, lower self. The lower self is operating from this perspective in a world of experience through this process. This is how it all ties together. And we need to consider that, because that's always important. This, in the Hermetic Kabbalion that was written in 1908 by Atkinson, who I think was of the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor, as far as I know, an initiate. At least a modern version of that. But whatever the case, an initiate. Who worked on Isis Unveiled with H.P. Blavatsky, and therefore had a hand in certain types of mediumship. It's questionable where the information came from for the Kabbalion, because it's claimed that it was written down for the first time. It had been not written down until that time of 1908. It's just a big mystery. We don't really know for sure, but it could have come from work that happened in mediumship. It could have come from any number of sources. It could have been, like he said, and just oral and passed down from initiate to initiate and just not written down. He got close enough to the changing of the ages, and Aquarian age was soon at hand, and decided it's time to go ahead and print the Kabbalion. Something like that happened. Things that are contained in the Kabbalion are the 7 principles. And you can see them in scripture. In my other one, I went and pointed out where all these 7 principles appear throughout the Western Judeo-Christian Bible, for sure, and all throughout Vedic tradition and Taoism, and in a lot of what so-called like native cultures and primitive mythologies, so-called. They're not actually all that primitive when you dive into these things. It's disrespectful in a way. So, I'm going to cover this Kabbalion axiom of vibration. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. I've already covered that. This is the axiom quoted in the Kabbalion. A lot of people reject it as a modern work, but it's good, and it's good for what it is. There are biases from the late 19th century, early 20th century that I think could be cleaned up a lot. Other than that, it's good for what it is. And as far as biases go, when I'm reading past literature, not just ancient literature, but in the near past, I always keep an understanding of the biases of the time and place and the writers. And I have an understanding of that as I read, and I would encourage everyone to do so. If you don't naturally do that, you would be wise to do that. Just overlook that, because a lot of people miss a lot of very valuable content because they see a biased attitude here and it's off-putting, and they turn away, and then they miss the truths that are there. That's why I say that. Don't let the personal bias of the past discourage you from analyzing and looking for truth in places that it sometimes have the surface appearance of unfavorable, like in the Bible, in place, where there's a lot of unfavorable language and concepts in the Bible, like slavery, misogyny, and all atrocities, genocide, terrible things. But it's from the minds of Bronze Age people. So as reading, I keep that in mind. This is from the Bronze Age. They did not have the sophistication that we have right now, and therefore they couldn't express that. It was impossible to them to do so. I just look at what they were reaching for in their aspirations. They were falling short of those for sure. But, and then we could take the baton and we have our own aspirations that we will fall short of. And just and be open-minded about ancient literature and ancient texts, especially of the sacred variety. They all go back to Vedic and Hermetic sources and cores. That's what produces all of this. And that's why it keeps lining up to the discoveries of modern science today, because we're rediscovering what allegedly was already discovered by lost civilizations in our past that we just don't fully understand. People have been seeing these mysteries and getting a glimpse of them now, like what's underneath the Giza necropolis, what's underneath all those, and then they found stuff underneath all of these other similar sacred sites around the world, and it's a can of worms that's beginning to open up, and it's gonna open up more and more as time goes on. We're going to learn more about the lost history that has been known and concealed by responsible sources, awaiting the time when it will be correct to allow a lot of that knowledge out into public domain. So the Kabbalion was a step deeper into what went into public domain, ahead of what would be the Aquarian Age coming. Modern science agrees with vibration. Everything vibrates. Nothing is truly at rest until we get into things like the irreducible ontological primitive that I was talking about. And that could be visualized as the unmoved mover of all movement. You notice that the unmoved mover is first principle. To get to the vibration, you have to get out of the first principle, whichever way we arrange this. And there's other ways to do it. We can even put vibration next in order, hint, hint, ahead of the correspondence, causing the correspondence. There's different ways of viewing this, but mind is always first. Mind is always first. The vibration is an accompaniment of the preconditions of omni, non-local mind. And that is the source, end, and supporting ground. The mystery behind this, even. The mystery behind my images. Let's make my images transparent to the transcendent mystery. The non-dual transcendent. Non-dual, beyond all of this. Dualistic writing. Is the source, end, and supporting ground of all life and being. That is the deep message. That is what the myths are meant to convey on psychological and spiritual levels. That is the truth. All of this other stuff is just ways of trying to visualize the truth that extends to outside of what the intellectual mind can fathom, conceive, comprehend, and conceptualize. What we're doing right here is left hemisphere. Analyzing, intellectualizing the mystical. The mystical itself is direct experience. And the point of every one of these principles is to direct the individual within a functional collective who retains all of the rights of an individual in a functional collective of fully righted individuals with liberty and personal independence and everything else. There's no loss of that here. This is a philosophically libertarian. In the strength, in the independence, in the liberty of the individual, a Western concept, a Western tenet, has its soul, has its source in the non-dual, in the non-local. This is how to connect the truth through and through, all the way through the lesson. It doesn't matter that these can be called metaphors. It doesn't matter that these can be called indirect knowledge. None of that matters. The indirect knowledge serves a purpose to orient to El Elyon, the most high concept of God within these Hermetic inspired religious traditions. God Most High would be the mystery of existence itself that informs everything we can conceive of in the left hemisphere or intellectual mind. That kind of poises us on the edge of the cliff, looking at the holistic, non-local content that is available through experience, not through intuitive, emotional mind, through experiential, that informs the human intellect. That's what's happening in this corresponding vibratory reality that repeats itself at all possible perceptual scales, because all levels of scale are just perceptions. They're just local perceptions in a non-local reality. I've left no stone unturned here, or I've taken it to the mystery, to the tremendum, the mysterium tremendum at Fascinensis, which is where it's rightfully placed by Hermes to his most advanced students when he does the sealed lips discourse. He took it to here. That's where it's meant to be taken. That is the Hermetic tradition. In the Vedic tradition, there's the story of a father talking to a son about existence and the mystery of being. And the son is asking where things come from generally. And he says, take the seed of that banyan tree, son, and we'll break it. And we get into this Russian doll situation. Russian dolls. They get all the way down to where they can no longer break the seed apart. They're breaking a seed, there's another seed. Break a seed, another seed. Layers. They're getting the mind into layered reality. Finally, there's transparency. And he goes, look, son, what do you see there? And he says, nothing, sir. He says, that which you do not see. I'm going to illustrate this. It's a big point. That transparency that you do not see is the source of the great banyan that you do see. This is a valuable lesson. This is teaching proper metaphysics to the next generation. This is a lost knowledge. So there is an example of Hermes to his most advanced students given in the Kabbalion that takes the mind to the preconditions of its own existence. There is a citable story in the Upanishads about the great banyan that explicitly covers the same discourse and the importance of knowledge preservation and continuation generationally. That's what this is. That's what this is all about. Millennials, Gen Zs, the next generation. Well informed about the truth of metaphysics. Deep spirituality. This is truth. This is the source, end, and supporting ground of all life and being. Street name God. But not God in the false sense. There's a lot of people taking God in the false sense. This is God in the most true and accurate sense that the intellectual mind can conceive of God, and the next place is to get involved in direct experience, which only you, the individual, can achieve. No one can. You can be led to the water, but you can't be helped or made to drink. You have to do the drinking, and then you graduate from the extent that you can experience with the left hemisphere, with the intellectual mind, and you graduate in what can be known by direct acquaintance, which is what Schopenhauer went further than Kant with. Kant said we can never know the thing in itself with the intellect, and he was correct. But it was only half of the truth. Schopenhauer came in with his concept of the will, and through that realized that through direct acquaintance we can know the mystery beyond the intellect. And he's correct. Through meditation, psychedelics, this happens. Near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, there are ways in which this happens that we can point to and that exist within the field of psi testing. Dr. Dean Radin and people who are into psi testing, like the real Ghostbusters for real in real life, that are doing that kind of psi testing. Well, there is such a thing as direct experience, and that is a type of knowledge too. This is not the end of knowledge. Knowledge is here, and there is wisdom knowledge in here. Deep wisdom knowledge is the holistic variety, and it's here in the direct experience. So all these lessons are to show the intellectual mind the gate, the precipice, the cliff, the way to direct experience. It would be irresponsible if I didn't take it all the way there. If I left people cliffhanging, didn't just put it out there. This is it. So I think that's good for the third principle because I've got to get through all 7. I'll cut it off there.